and then a whole lot of people who just sign their name and carry the card.
Folks, if you have a question and you want to call into the show, the number to call is 646-727-3387. Lines are open, and we'll be happy to take your call and question. There's a question from the chat room, Jim, and it says, I guess there's a new book coming out about some worldwide UFO display on October 13th, which has numerological significance to the powers that be. Do you know about that?
Only vaguely, but of course I always take all these certain predictions with a huge grain of salt, because I've heard such things for years, and as a general rule, they don't pan out. And that's because, quite frankly, in my research with the Army's remote viewing program, which is where they use the psychic technology of what we used to call clairvoyance, and they cleaned it up and said, no, this is remote viewing, but that's what it is. The remote viewers that were in the Army's unit that I've talked to, and that's most of them, it's really fascinating because they're able to actually go back and remote view past events. And when they look into the past, everything's pretty solid because it's already happened, and they can see what's happening. But what really fascinated me was as they begin to look into the future, the further into the future they go, the hazier it gets. And that's actually kind of good, because that tells me that the future is not preordained. It's not set in stone. And that's important for all of us to understand, because if we look ahead and we don't like what we see coming up, well, then let's work and change it, because it can be changed.
I had Dr. Brooks Agnew on the show a couple weeks back, and he has an interesting view on it also, and that is that's exactly right, that the future isn't set in stone, that there can be multiple timelines that come on out, and just simply by willing everybody having a consciousness or an idea, like in this instance, let's just say a conscious awakening on 9/11 truth, and we get the majority of Americans, or let's just say the world, to come to the realization that, hey, this needs to be done. Well, then that will projects itself out and actually changes reality, and that's how he explained it to me, and that was the Mickey Mouse version. I mean, he could get into it a lot more, but he kept it toned down for me, and I certainly did appreciate that.
Well, that's for example, whether it's 9/11, Kennedy assassination, government cover-ups, the fighting in Iraq, Afghanistan, the takeover of the New World Order, the economic collapse that we're in the middle of, regardless of what it is, that's why my whole thing is knowledge. Knowledge is the key. If a tipping point of the population can be reached, in other words, if a significant percentage of the population can simply become aware of the truth and of what's really going on, just that simple awareness will change it. Because after all, there's more of us than there are of them.
That's right. There's definitely, we do outnumber them, that's for sure. And I think if people just realized that and got it through their heads, we might actually be able to make some headway here. But in all honesty, Jim, I mean, people like you, the things that we try to do here on the show, and of other authors and radio hosts that go out and try to stick their neck out to get these agendas and these quote-unquote conspiracies brought into the light. I mean, it's because of that I think that we're starting to see an actual turn in the tide. And it's encouraging to me. The only thing is I really hope and pray that these powers that be don't try to go out with a bang. You know what I'm saying? Because the writing's on the wall there that I think they know that they are not in the long-term plan. At least that's my feeling on it. But they're trying, and they're pulling out all the stops to make sure that they maintain their control.
Exactly. They're not just going to fold up shop and leave town. They're just not. They're going to fight to the bitter end. And that's why it's incumbent upon us, all of us, each and every one of us to start trying to figure out what's really going on. And just by that sheer knowingness, then it'll begin to change. Plus, then we can begin to get an idea of what we need to do about it. My new book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, How the New World Order, Man-Made Diseases, and Zombie Banks Are Destroying America, has already hit the New York Times bestseller list, and it only came out at the end of June. But I tell people, here's what's wrong, here's who caused it, and here's what we can do about it. It's all in there. Talk
a little bit about your experience with the editor this time with this book. I mean, you've published books before in the past, and have you ever run into a problem with censorship before?
Well, yes and no. I've had 4 books canceled on me, even after a signed contract. One of those, the first one, was about the Army's remote viewing program. I had that story before anybody else had ever even heard the term. I had a book that was slated to come out in the summer of 1995, and as they were going, it had passed the legal vetting. They actually had advanced copies. They had advanced sales, and as it was going to the printers, it was just shut down. They said, no, we're not going to publish this. But to prove to you that was nothing but censorship, anyone who's had any experience with publishing knows that if for whatever reason a book cannot be published and yet they have paid advance money for it, then you have to pay back the advance. But in this case, they paid me the rest of the advance, gave me the rights to the material back, and basically essentially said just, hey, here's some money, go away and leave us alone. And then the same thing happened to me in 2002, when I had a contract with HarperCollins, a leading publisher, to publish a book on 9/11. And the same thing happened there. Even though I had passed the legal vetting, the last thing the publisher's attorney said to me was, well, you've satisfied me. Now, that didn't mean everything in the book was 100% ground truth, but what it meant was everything was well-sourced, well-supported, well-attributed, and there was no legal reason for stopping that book. And yet, right before that was to go to press, a vice president who admitted she had never even read the book said, we're not going to publish this book. And again, they paid me back the advance and said, here, go away. And that really bothered me because that was at a time when interest and concern was at fever pitch, and if truthful information had gotten to the public, it might have changed a lot of things, including the support that was being garnered at the time based on lies and deceit, which got us into the occupation of Iraq. But now this one, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy. So I've had books canceled on me in the past.
Mm-hmm.
This was, for the first time, I had the book, manuscript in, it passed the legal vetting, it was ready to go. When a senior editor told me, he said, well, now, wait a minute, I didn't contract for all of this. I think you need to take this whole section out of there. And I said, no, I don't think so. I think it's very important, and I think people need to hear this. And he said, well, let me put it this way. If you don't take that out, I won't publish the book. So I was left with the choice of either having none of the information come out or take out what he wanted out. And the irony of this is that the biggest section he wanted removed from the book, which it was how the corporate media controls the news and information.
Imagine that.
And I told him right then, I said, well, you kind of proved my point, didn't you? And then he started lamely trying to argue that, well, that, making me take something out of my book, that's not really censorship. Censorship is after you have something published and then you don't distribute it or something like that. And I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, what you're doing is the very dictionary definition of censorship. But, that was the first time that I was just overtly censored.
It really makes me sick, but it is kind of poetic that they're censoring out the fact that the mainstream media censors things. And
it's actually kind of a hoot if it wasn't so serious and so sad.
Right. I mean, if it wasn't your book that you're trying to get, and get this stuff out to the people, that's one thing. But
the next largest section that they made me take out was anything relating to 9/11. That is still a taboo subject with the corporate mass media. And when I say the corporate mass media, I'm only talking about 5 multinational corporations. And these 5 corporations control everything we see and hear. And I'm not just talking about news. I'm talking about magazines, books, billboards, satellite, cable, movies, TV, networks, you name it. 5 corporations control everything we see and hear. And the only reason that there's any advance today in knowledge is primarily thanks to the Internet. And they're working real hard now to curtail that, since Obama has named his new, Internet czar, and that they're working on the Cybersecurity Act of 2010, which would allow the president, in this case, Barack Hussein Obama, to simply pull a switch and turn off the Internet if he decided there was some problem.
And we're kind of already experiencing this now in a way. I mean, we were talking about this last week where, you hear often the Internet kill switch being referred to. And I think in certain aspects, the kill switch is already being used just in a targeted capacity. Because we've noticed, and Joyce Riley, the Power Hour, Pastor Butch, us, we've all been noticing that it's been harder and harder and harder to get through shows, to have callers, to coordinate things, just simple communication, without having to really jump through hoops in order to make it go. And even then, I mean, you're talking technical difficulties like crazy. So,
well, I hate to be the one to tell you this, Joe, but it's going to get worse.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely incredible. And then you look at who was one of the sponsors of this Cybersecurity Act was Jay Rockefeller. Oh, I guess the Rockefellers don't want us talking about them.
But I will say, Jim, on a positive note, that this show has been, knock on wood, of course, free of the usual technical difficulties that we face. So that's encouraging. You must have a nice, good aura about you. You're protecting us, and I appreciate that.
and like I said, there's more of us than there are of them, and we're getting smarter all the time. Another sign of hope, let me point to the Real ID Act, okay?
Oh, my favorite.
This was passed in 2005 by the Bush administration, and it required a national federal identification card, essentially. And it was supposed to go into effect by 2008. But 2008 came, and there was about 14 or 16 states that said, nah, wait a minute. And interestingly enough, they didn't object to it out of any libertarian view. They objected to it because they said, well, you're ordering us to do all this stuff under Real ID Act, but you're not giving us the money to do it. We don't really have the money to do this. So they just balked and said, no, we don't think we can do this. So they said, okay, we'll put it off till 2009. Well, 2009 came. Now here we are, approaching late 2010. It's still not in full effect because now other states have joined in. In other words, a lot of people in a lot of the states said, no, we're not going to do that. And I see that as a hopeful sign, especially with the 10th Amendment legislation that's being passed by more and more state legislatures. And the 10th Amendment, of course, simply states that anything that is not specifically given as an authority to the federal government belongs to the states and the people. And we need to start asserting our rights as free states and free individuals and just say no. No, we're not going to do that.
That's right.
Deal. When they say, okay, we got to go attack Iran, we got to say, no, we don't.
No, and if you do that, then let's do it the constitutional way, and have a formal declaration of war. Right,
which requires 2/3 of vote of Congress. If you get 2/3 of Congress to vote for it, then okay, maybe we need to do that. But if you can't get 2/3 of Congress to say, yeah, we need to go to war, then chances are we don't need to go to war.
That's right. And think about it, Jim.